I think one of the things that's, largely discounted in a performance culture is the value of brand. So when I say brand, I don't mean it in like the top of funnel context and creating brand communications, but it's just like the perception that customers have of the company in their mind.
This podcast is brought to you by MarketMuse, an AI-powered platform that sets the standard for content quality. Visit marketmuse.com to discover your content opportunities. Hey there, I'm Bernie Borges, Chief Customer Officer at Vengresso, the leader in digital sales transformation. I'm also the host of this show, the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. On this podcast, I showcase B2B marketers in the trenches, showcasing strategies and tactics that are working for them in their modern marketing journey. Be sure to listen to the end of each conversation for my summary and takeaway, as well as the closing message. And now, here's this week's Modern Marketer. Welcome to episode 294. And my guest this week is Paul Cowan, CMO at FreshBooks. Paul, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks. Great to be here, Bernie.
Absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to our conversation. We're going to talk about why you at FreshBooks are doubling down on customer data marketing in 2021. But before we get to that, let's begin where, as you know, I always like to begin with a brief introduction to your company, FreshBooks. Who is FreshBooks?
Sure. So FreshBooks is we're a cloud accounting platform with a focus on helping small business owners manage their business. So, a lot of people are familiar with the accounting software industry. So, the big difference between us and some of the other competitors in the space is that we really focus on owners. Unlike some of the other folks who built their platforms for accountants. So ours is really focusing kind of solving the day-to-day business challenges that owners have. And so we really kind of grew, like not surprisingly, because our founder had a problem like overrunning an invoice many, many years ago. And so he was that owner who had the lived pains, and we've just kind of kept evolving over the last 15 years to keep helping solve more and more pains for the small business owner.
Yeah, I remember when we talked to plan for this call, I mentioned that I've known of FreshBooks. So you've been around 15 years. So
Yeah.
you're a mature company. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And you support businesses like small business, self-employed, freelancers, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we're really kind of the company is growing, really kind of servicing the freelancer, the smaller side of the SMB equation. Really kind of focused on service-based businesses. So, folks like IT professionals, construction, and so recently we've really been looking at expanding both the types of customers that we service as well as the markets that we're in as well.
Okay, cool. So what we're here to talk about is you're doubling down on customer data marketing in 2021. And I think anyone in marketing these days, of course, really needs to have a strong grip on data, right? We can't be in marketing in 2021 without a real strong handle on, using data. But you're really focused on that in 2021. But in our preparation for the podcast, you mentioned that, how you got here. And so I don't want to steal your thunder, Paul. How did you get to that decision? What did you learn in 2020 that really drove that conclusion of focusing on customer data marketing in 2021?
Yeah. So, last year was a really unpredictable year. So I think the one thing that we learned was to really expect the unexpected. So, we go back to that March timeframe when the entire world was blowing up and really trying to recast what the rest of the year would look like. We didn't know what was going on as people were going into lockdowns and markets were kind of being shut down, and we really had no predictability as to how the market was going to respond. So we ran a couple different scenarios and obviously took them to our board and tried to figure out how we were going to end the year. And there was lots of companies who were doing like up to 10 or 20 different types of scenarios as to what was going to happen. But really, as we went through, we were really kind of focused on growth and trying to grow within our customer base and expand others. What we saw was our customers were very resilient. So we had a nice V-shaped recovery. Our customers, some left, but we also saw a lot of new customers coming into the market, which was really really interesting. And so, we saw this bounce back. We were overperforming against what our forecasts were, and we really realized the power that we have to have in terms of like just understanding what's going on in real time data. And so, just being able to go in and dive into what's actually happening within our customers and see what was going on from an actual kind of data standpoint, and from like understanding the segments, how they were behaving through the pandemic times that we were dealing in, was incredibly important. And so we also realized that it wasn't only us that needed to look at this data, but we also started to see that other people needed it, like the governments to do their pandemic planning and try to understand stimulus packages that they should put into market. And even the people that the customers that we were servicing, they need to get access to this because they had no idea how to plan for their business. So that's kind of what led us to where we're at today, because we really see this need to be able to take some of this valuable data that we currently are sitting on and be able to surface it back to different types of groups as a real kind of driver of growth for the organization.
Okay, cool. So we are sitting here, we're well into 2021. We're still in the first quarter as we record this, but well into 2021, right? You said before we press record, 2020 feels like a long time ago already.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So what does 2021 look like in terms of that focus on customer data marketing?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll set the stage a little bit for like what we've been doing, and what our kind of key growth factors have been. So, as we went through 2020, like the plan hasn't changed too much in terms of what our core strategies are. So, we over the last 15 years, we've built up a really great performance structure. We play the attrition model like a lot of brands in the SaaS space. We're acquiring customers, as I mentioned, who are on the smaller side of the SMB equation. So, we're if you go to our pricing page, you can see that what our average price plans are and stuff. So we're not chasing after huge deals or anything like that. So, we're bringing in lots of customers. We're growing those customers with us over time, and it's this the self-service game that we're in. We've started to enhance our platform and appeal to larger types of companies. So we've invested in a direct sales force, which is something new for us. So we have to make sure we build up that muscle. So it's not just about the performance game. We also have to make sure that we've got a bit more of a halo around brand and what's going on there. And last year we did some other activities. I've been in the chair for 16 months, and I did all the cliche things that a CMO does. I did a rebrand, I did a reorg. They were all needed in terms of how to structure the company for growth. But we really kind of got the entire organization lined up against how do we activate these new channels. And so 2021 has been about we've learned a lot through 2020, and now we're really starting to get those different channels moving and supplying the predictable demand that we need across multiple activation channels that we have, and we're starting to see some really good results so far.
Okay. You mentioned that you're investing in a direct sales force. Is that the first time in the 15-year history of the company that you're going with a direct sales force?
Yeah, so we've had some salespeople in the organization for a few years, but it's really been kind of to manage the outliers, and so now we're really focused on building it up and building it globally as well. So I mentioned we were expanding into new markets, so we opened up. Most of our business is done in the the U.S. We've expanded and opened an office in Amsterdam, over in Europe, as well as we opened another office. We have our headquarters are in Toronto, Canada, and we opened another office down in Raleigh, North Carolina. And so this has really been about, one, expanding our sales force so that we have coverage in key markets now, and then we have to build the entire machine to support it. So making sure that we have the demand side and the predictable demand side built out, which is a team that we didn't have. So I had to build out that team and get them in the door so that we could have that activity going. And so this is like a new channel. It's a new muscle. And so when organizations have never had this in the past, it's something very, very different in terms of how it impacts the operations of the company.
I love that. It's a new muscle. I
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So let's continue to unpack that, Paul. So now that you're investing in the direct sales force, you're doing demand gen. So what's that look like? How are you leveraging customer data marketing in the context of this plan to really feed your new family, right? The new family analogy is the sales team, right? How
Yeah,
are you doing it with customer data marketing, and
for
then
sure.
traditional core marketing activities as well?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the things that's, largely discounted in a performance culture is the value of brand. So when I say brand, I don't mean it in like the top of funnel context and creating brand communications, but it's just like the perception that customers have of the company in their minds. So we needed to kind of get away from just the pure like performance driven culture of like, hey, we need to drive that bottom funnel activity and conversion, and into, we really need to make sure that we're looked at differently in the minds of the customers. So from a customer data marketing perspective, I really think that from a lot of the value that organizations like ours can bring is by uncovering kind of these like untapped gems, or these undrilled wells that we may have. And with us, we're sitting on a tremendous amount of invoice and expense data with the SMB universe. So, 15 years of historical data in terms of how small businesses have either created revenue or spent their money, is an incredible data set to look at, and we haven't really been looking at that as an asset that we have. And so, through some of the activity we were doing late in 2020, we were revealing some of the trends that we were seeing. So we did a report on the impact that the COVID that COVID had on women and women business owners, and how it took them longer to recover than their male counterparts in many different industries. We're looking at the top level data in terms of just overall business health, and then diving in deeper into things like the expense data. So where small businesses spending their money on, and what brands are they spending their money on? So when we talk about the opportunity in data marketing, we're sitting on this like huge resource to be able to turn that to our customers, or to prospects in the industry in general, and say, hey, here's how your business should be performing. Here are all the historical norms that you should be expecting your business to do, and this value that we could create is going to be one of those great magnets that I feel will help propel our business along quite well.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I want to unpack that a little bit further. But
Yeah.
before we do that, Paul, I want to take a brief pause here for a message from our sponsor. MarketMuse is a content intelligence platform that sets the standard for content quality. Their AI powered software enables companies to create predictably better content at scale that increases traffic and engagement, improves productivity, and drives revenue. Get more out of your content with personalized recommendations and strategic content insights. Go to marketmuse.com and use code VENGRESSO10 to claim 10% off your first year. All right, Paul. So let's unpack that a little bit further now. So you've got all this rich data, as you said, 15 years of history. And now how are you going to harness that to feed your new family, the direct sales force, in terms of, your 2021 customer data focused strategy?
Sure. So, in terms of there's obviously a bunch of layers to this kind of like marketing cake that we have. The B2B team is one of it. We also have the performance team and everything we're doing on that side from an acquisition standpoint. We don't look at them as two distinct funnels. We look at them all as one funnel, and then we kind of pluck people out of those funnels and put them over to the BD world, or we keep them in self-serve, all depending on kind of what we're seeing and what the potential prospects look like to us as they move through the funnel. But how we're using this data and how we're taking it to market is that we've obviously done a bunch of reports, so we're playing that standard game of like content syndication, gated content, being able to create specific industry deep dives. So if it's looking specifically at the construction vertical and how are they actually trending and what does their business health look like and how is their spending patterns changed and how much do they prefer Home Depot versus Lowe's and trying to understand like how are they managing their supply chains, and really being able to provide that level of granularity throughout the funnel. So any resource that we can create on that side can go to a salesperson, whether they're in the midst of working a deal. It can be content that we can gate, that we can start to progressively profile on, as well as we've created a microsite that is explorable. So again, gated, but it's you can get to it. People can go through, look at it. Our prospects will get there, or our customers will get there, and be able to look at how does their vertical look, how has it changed, and be able to derive some insights into their business. So it helps them with their planning, and then eventually we all assume that it's going to then help drive activity back to us and convert through the funnel.
So it sounds like you're going to do a lot of, or are doing a lot of content driven marketing, right?
Yeah.
Gated and ungated, and then attracting your target audience to your website, to your digital platforms, your including a microsite. And then, as you said, Paul, you said it's one funnel, right? So then you'll sort of bifurcate them into whatever bucket they fall into, and then those that are B2B will then go through some kind of either a lead scoring, whatever, my words, not your words, but some kind
Yep.
of a process before they get handed off to sales. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yeah, exactly. So, we use all the different tools to be able to identify, as people are coming through the funnel. We do data augmentation on them. So, we know obviously the channels that they're coming in from and the different touches that they've had. And then we use other third parties to help understand like what industry they're from and do some progressive profiling on them, which all kind of go into the scoring that we do on them, and the engagement scoring that we do. Plus, we also have, when people start trials on our platform, we also have the activity that they do there. So we'll also do some predictive modeling on them to be able to try to understand what type of customer are they going to be based on their engagement in our platform too. So all of these signals that we take. The cool thing is it's like this virtuous data circle where it all started with knowing something about our customer and then bringing other people in and then progressively knowing more about them because they engaged with customer data. So it's kind of an interesting circle of life from a customer standpoint. But
Yeah.
we'll bring them all through, and then at the end of it all, it helps just like improve our overall kind of funnel efficacy and our conversion rates overall.
Yeah. I'm curious, are you leaning on the sales team to provide feedback that you can then incorporate into your strategy in terms of, I don't want to say the quality of the leads, because of course salespeople are always going to give you that feedback, whether you ask for it or not, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of like validating the data, giving you some insight into perhaps certain trends that you're focused on and from a data standpoint that are more effective than others in terms of conversion to customers, that kind of thing. Are you already doing that, or is that part of the plan? Or
Yeah, we're of course we're already doing that. I mean, as we stand up the team and as we're bringing more people on, we're trying to follow kind of like of course the best in class process in terms of having that feedback loop and making sure we have the disposition codes feeding back into the tools that we have both on the self serve funnel and on the B2B funnel as well. So we always listen to that, and I always joke, like, we're marketers are really lazy. Like, we always try to do the least amount of work for the most amount of return. And when the salespeople aren't in the room, I will say that the only people lazy are the salespeople, but they're following the money. So, the great thing about working with sales folks is that, they're always going to give us feedback. They're always going to tell us the things that are happening, but we always have to listen to them because they're the ones who are on the front line and hearing the feedback, and they're the ones who have the best insights as it relates to what things are going to resonate the best with customers. So I love talking to them about, like, what are the different types of analysis and tools and aids that they would have to help drive any kind of deals that they're actually working on.
Okay. Now, since this is, I like, you use the word, you're standing up. I like that phrase. We use that phrase a lot at
Yeah.
Vengesso, standing up an initiative, something that's new. So you're standing up a sales team, a B2B sales team, for the first time in the history of the 15-year history of the company. So you've probably done some kind of a SWOT analysis of some sort. Have you identified potential, we'll call them threats, things to kind of be on the lookout for, things that just may not go perfectly as planned, that you're just kind of anticipating, maybe not anticipating, Paul, but just
Yeah.
kind of ready to respond to?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the big challenges that we have is because we're our deal size is smaller. We're not chasing 6-figure enterprise deals or
Right.
7-figure enterprise deals. So the dynamic of what we're doing, it's a turn and burn game. So if we build that predictable funnel and we know exactly how many calls need to be made to close the amount of business that we need to do, our deal cycle is not taking 6 months or 3 months. It's sometimes about 3 days or less. So, the main thing that we need to do is, one, make sure that we all understand that cycle and how quickly that cycle will turn around. The other thing is then making sure, when you have to be doing velocity, and you're not hitting that velocity, that's when things can go bad really, really quickly. So that's when people will go off. Like, if they're not hitting their quota, bad behaviors are still going to start to happen. And so we need to make sure that we've got a system and tools in place so that people can nail their quota, and we've got that constant flow of prospect activity and pipeline coming into the sales team. So the main things that we're looking to make sure we're doing is, like, obviously, training on getting through the obvious objections and all those types of things, and identifying what's going to happen very, very early on in a conversation. But then also making sure that the sales team is building their muscle in terms of the actions that they need to take. So marketing, we have to supply a lot of volume in, just based on what the volume we need to provide into the sales organization and what they need to close. But the other side is, like, they need to do their own kind of hunting and as well, like most organizations. But we need to make sure that they're hunting in all the right places too. So I think that the things that we're really, really mindful is, like, make sure that volume's there. If people are not finding the volume is good, or the quality is good, that we can shift it really, really quickly. So, because salespeople are great at finding, like, other places to get more prospects and more pipeline. So we just need to make sure that they're not going in and breaking other systems and stuff like that to be accessing them. And so they understand all the knock-on effects if they're hunting in places that we're already trying to manage activity in as well.
What I'm enjoying about this conversation, Paul, is that we are talking about not just your go-to-market strategy, but also the sales strategy, albeit at a 50,000 foot level. But
Mhm.
hey, look, the name of this podcast is the Modern Marketing Engine Podcast, right? And the modern marketer today has to be joined at the hip with selling strategy. And clearly, by the way you are articulating the strategy, you are absolutely joined at the hip with your sales strategy at FreshBooks. And I'm really enjoying that aspect of this whole conversation, because we began by talking about your focus on customer data marketing, and now here we are, like, how you're going to sell,
Yep.
right? And that the modern marketer needs to be all about that. Don't you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And they're really hard to find. So, it's, I find that, in staffing teams these days, that's one of the biggest challenges is, with how marketing has been progressing, I have to run a performance team that has to know how to work within the Google ecosystem and Facebook and using other tools and doing attribution modeling and be doing machine learning on top of all of our performance activity. And that's a really, really specific type of knowledge that they have to have. Then I've got to have a B2B team that's working with our sales folks and managing that funnel and doing all the nurtures and the other activities that are going on and know the entire MarTech stack in terms of how to drive that engine. And so as like, you know, different marketers are progressing and even progressing in their careers, like the amount of routes that they could go and do they, focus specifically within a vertical or do they go horizontal? It's getting harder and harder to find people who actually get that full end-to-end process of how a lead becomes a deal, and especially when you add multiple channels into the equation, it becomes even more challenging to actually assemble the right teams who can do all these things.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. All right, Paul, we are at a point in our recording where I want to do a summary, kind of recap of the things that we discussed. And then I think you know the drill. I'm going to ask you for your commentary so you can elaborate on any points or maybe make any corrections that are necessary.
Perfect.
And then I'll ask you for your digital contact information, and then we'll bring it to a wrap. So we began our conversation with an introduction to your company, FreshBooks, a brand that I was familiar with previously, a 15-year-old company, cloud accounting software built for small business owners who are managing their business, focus on owners, their day-to-day business challenges, and very service-based businesses that you're focused on. And we talked about how what you learned in 2020 is that early in 2020, when the world changed, you really couldn't predict how you'd respond. So you ran a bunch of different scenarios, but you discovered that your customers were very resilient and you were able to continue to acquire many new customers and you ended up overperforming against forecast. And you were looking at the data to understand like how that happened. And you also realized that that data that you've been sitting on, not only in 2020, but historically, is data that others can use, like the government and your own customers. So you're focused this year on really mining customer data and going to continue to focus on acquiring more customers in the SMB market, both self-service, but you're also investing in a direct sales force. And so while you've done traditional marketing like rebranding and reorging, and you've also expanded into new markets. You mentioned Amsterdam, you're located in Toronto, and plus you expanded also into Raleigh, North Carolina, so that you've got a sales footprint in those locations. So as it relates to this year, you're really focused on continuing to build the brand, the perception of the brand, harnessing the customer data, and really tapping into what you call the untapped gems. I think I'm quoting you on that. And how you said like the invoice data from the SMB universe that you've served over the last 15 years, you've got a ton of data in there. So you can report on things like how COVID has impacted women business owners, how COVID has really just impacted the overall health of small businesses, and also how companies are spending their money, expense data. And so that data, those insights can be shared, and you can do a lot of things with that, including, of course, use them as lead magnets in the way of content marketing. And in speaking of content marketing, you're going to do, you're going to look at things like industry deep dives, like you mentioned construction, for example, and you'll, of course, have traditional gated and ungated content. In terms of your sales team, you're really focused on supporting them. I mentioned a few times, kind of feeding their family,
Yep.
right? Giving them the tools that they can kind of monitor the lead flow, getting feedback from them also on customer conversations to learn really what's resonating, where the biggest opportunities are. And you mentioned that because of the nature of your business, they're selling small deals. So the deal cycle, the velocity needs to be high, right? The sales cycle you said is sometimes 3 days or less. So really understanding the dynamics of the sales cycle and then also providing the requisite training that they need to be able to, have those conversations, overcome objections, et cetera. And I like what you said, building muscle for the sales team, enabling them to do their own hunting as well. And again, making sure that the volume of activity is there so you can provide the velocity that's needed for the salespeople to make their quota and stay, right? Because salespeople stay when they're making their quota, right?
Yep.
And then the last thing we discussed was sort of the dynamics of the current marketing team and how the talent that you need includes things like data analytics, understanding B2B, interfacing with sales, understanding MarTech, and also understanding how a lead becomes a deal. So it's not just about providing the lead, but how does that lead become a deal, which really takes it full cycle. And we talked about the importance of marketing really working closely with sales in that full cycle capacity. So I'll leave my summary there, Paul. What would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the one parting thought I'll leave is like all of that. Um, all of that is will never work unless you have a real deep obsession with customer understanding. Easy to say. I think a lot of us in marketing kind of believe that we're doing this, but I think organizations really need to think every day how they're getting closer and closer to their customers, and really what are the drivers that are either making them want to be a customer of yours, or want to be a customer of yours, and what are you doing to help improve their life every day, and not just doing it and then putting it on a PowerPoint and or in a grid and saying here's our customers, but really figuring out how you can operationalize that detailed, granular understanding of the customer within the organization. And some things that we've done over the past year, we started a program called Roll Up Your Sleeves that was an output of COVID, but has continued, where we just reached out to customers and said, "Hey, you're having some hard times. Why don't you just ask us for help? We've got a bunch of people here who know performance marketing, who know B2B sales, who know customer support." And it ended up where we had a person on our dev team was hanging drywall at a daycare to get them up and running when COVID restrictions ended. And like I've been chatting with different folks like in the design community in Atlanta on how to pivot their businesses. So I think like getting that customer obsession and then having ways that it becomes something that is ingrained in the culture. Otherwise, all of the activity that you're doing in terms of trying to appeal to those customers is never going to work.
Love it. Couldn't agree more. And you made a key point that it needs to be ingrained in your culture. It needs to be pervasive across the entire company.
Yeah,
It needs not just a marketing thing, not just a sales thing, but it's a company culture.
absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely the hardest thing to do.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And sometimes as companies go through their maturation over the span of years and years and years, there's an evolution, right? And sometimes people that were with you in year 5 through 10 are not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the ones that are with you in 10 to 15 or 15 to 20, right? Just based on culture and priorities. So
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, Paul, where can my listener connect with you online just to connect with you and just follow everything you've got going on?
Yeah, for sure. On LinkedIn, I'm just Paul Cowan. So either /Paul Cowan or just search me, you'll be able to find me. Twitter is Cowan PKC, or if you just Google that, you'll find all my other things. If you want to, look at my Instagram and see some wonderful pictures of trees.
Cowan PKC.
You got
Fantastic.
it.
Well, Paul, my listener knows that both your LinkedIn profile and your Twitter handle will be linked up in our show notes page at vengresso.com. So, Paul, I just want to thank you for coming on this episode and sharing your story with me here on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks a lot.
Don't forget to use the code VENGRESSO10 for 10% off your personalized content recommendations at marketmuse.com. Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. Hey, if you're not subscribed, I invite you to hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast player so that you don't miss a single episode. And I'd love it if you give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. We publish a show notes page for each episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the conversation. Just go to vengresso.com and navigate to the podcast menu. And while you're there, be sure to check out our Modern Selling podcast hosted by Vengresso's CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, are you following the Modern Marketing Engine podcast on the socials? We're active on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and on YouTube. In fact, we publish each episode on YouTube for those who listen to audio content on YouTube. Hey, one last thing. If you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, I invite you to send me a personal invitation to connect. Now, please be sure to say that you're a listener of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you don't include a personal note, I have no way of knowing that that's how you found me. Until next time, I wish you continued success on your modern marketing journey.